I'm with Michael Knox, field investigator for MUFON Minnesota. So, Michael, you have some interesting stories to tell us.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I tell you, the nice thing about going to these conferences is you meet people that are experienced and they have a background similar to yours, usually very strange. Well, one of the strangest was about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, out in Phoenix in February, and they had the International Conference or Congress of UFOs. People from all over the world were there. I came out of down playing the slots down below in gambling a little bit, and then meeting with some people and talking and having a few sodas. And I was going up to my room at about 11:30, and there was a man standing against the wall of the hotel, leaned up against it, smoking a cigarette. And I looked at him and I said, that guy's military. Because I'm Navy and Air Force, and I've been around these type of people all my life. And I said, but he's special. And I went up to him, I shook hands, I said, how you doing? You want to have a smoke? And he gave me a smoke, and we're sitting there talking. And I said, how did you get into UFOs? Because I'm always investigating, always talking, always making contact. And he said, well, he said, you know, it's very interesting. I was a machinist on a ship of the Navy that was a submarine. And originally it was a fast attack submarine back in the 50s and 60s. And in the mid-70s it was refitted. They cut everything out from the sail back to the tail. They put in watertight doors that could be flooded, and they had another watertight door where they could push stuff in and store it. And he said, we got a message, and the message said, go to the Philippine area, and at that time they were up in the North Atlantic. Go to the Philippine area, and there are 3 objects that crashed into the water. My first question was, how did they know 3 objects had crashed in the water? Was somebody out there watching them? No.
Do you know what year this incident took place?
Say again? 77.
77?
About 1977. That was what he said. And he was on the ship at that time. He was not working with the SEALs, but the SEALs were on the ship. And whenever they did some evolution, when they did something in the water and they had stuff to move in, all the guys, the younger heavy lifters, would come back and help them load their stuff in. So they had the fixes. They had the latitude and longitude location of these 3 objects. It happened within just a couple of days, 3 days, that the crashes occurred. But it appeared it was in a region where at some point they were together. It's hard to say, but he said we sailed over there, and when we got there, the announcement was made that we were going to be picking up some unusual materials. And so they got started, and they were on the first one. They went down out of the boat, swam down there with their machines. They hauled this thing back up. It was 16 feet across. It was 7 feet high. When you touched it, it was like touching glass. It was just so slick. No rivets, no welds, nothing to indicate there was any separation. It was like it was poured in a mold. And it was a silverish gray color. And the only thing that was unusual as far as an opening, there was a hatch. And it was a small hatch on the very top of it. And it had a very unusual hinge, but you could tell it was a hinge, but they couldn't figure out how to open it. But it was closed up. So they took it, they slid it back inside after they measured it and everything. They covered it up with a tarp. They closed up the door. They went to the next site. They got there within a day or two. It was real close. And as they got there, they knew where it was. They went down, they picked it up. It was exactly the same kind of craft as the first one. It was round, it was a disc, 16 feet across, 7 feet high, and it had that unusual hatch on it, and it was sealed up tight.
Was it touching the floor of the sea, or?
Oh yeah, it was laying on the bottom. It was laying on the bottom.
Okay.
It wasn't real deep. He didn't say how deep they were, but it wasn't real deep, and it was pretty easy to get those up. So they went to the next one. They got to the next one and they had a problem, because this one, the hatch had popped on it, and it was full of water, and it was sitting on the bottom. So they hooked it up to a hoist type contraption. They got it up to the boat. They got help, and they scooted it into the hallway where the unloading took place, and they sealed everything up. They blew the water, and then they called for help.
So this one was heavier than the other?
Extremely heavy. It was just full of that water. Same size, same shape. Everything was exactly the same, except this time the hatch is standing open. This boy was there, and they called him down. And the XO said to him, "Hey, climb up there and look in and see what you see." So he got up there and he started retching. He started almost throwing up because of the stench coming out of the hole. And the water was black. There was no clarity. And the XO laughingly turned to one of the chiefs and said, "Have him go down in there and see what's there." And he told him, he said, "No way." And he slid down off of there, and he went over in the corner and he threw up because of the smell. So what they did was they got a bunch of people on it and they scooted it back in there and covered it up. They took it to a non-observable place in Philippines. They offloaded it from the sub. The people took it, put it in storage. They went back out to sea to do something else. And that's the way it was told to me. And when I talked to some people about it that were naval officers in submarines, nice guys, I don't remember names, but it was verified, and they said to me, "You're not supposed to know that."
No.
And then he laughed, at me, and he said, "But it's cool, isn't it?" And that was an experience I had, and I get those kinds of things happening all the time because I go to these meetings. I've been involved in this stuff since I was 10 years old that I remember. I don't remember exactly what happened when I was 10 until I got under hypnosis when I was almost 60. And I started, it was like somebody was turning switches on, and all of these memories from the time I was 10 all the way up to the present were coming back to me. And so I went to MUFON. That was my first MUFON meeting. Now, I had worked at investigating and debriefing pilots when I was 18 in the Air Force, when the pilots would go out and they were on a mission and they were out practicing or just transiting or whatever, and they had an altercation with UFOs. They would call the facility I worked at, either from the air on the radio or from the phone when they got back to their squadron, and they would tell me what happened. And I had a folder, and in that folder were pieces of paper that were report sheets, and I would write down what they were telling me. I would get the pertinent information, including their names and the occurrence and where exactly it happened and what time it happened, and everything I could come up with it, and exactly what it was they saw. And then I would take it to weather. They would put the weather down on the sheet in the position where the occurrence happened, and then I would take it to Intel, and I would turn it over, and that's the last I'd see it. I did.
What year was that?
1966 through 1967, and then I transferred to Germany. I was in Birkenfeld, Germany, in the Kusel Mountains near Trier.
But at that time, Blue Book was still open.
Oh yeah, Blue Book was still open. Now, that's funny, because when Blue Book, a couple of years ago, right before Christmas, released a bunch of their reports, and I said, wow, this is great. So I went to 66 and 67, and I looked under the area of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and North Dakota. And I've got all of those reports that they had on Blue Book on the computer. Not one of my reports was there. The ones that were there were civilian reports. They were military reports, but the guys were out with their girlfriend drinking beer or shooting pool or whatever it was they were doing out on the lake. And that was it. They didn't have any substantive reports. None of the military altercations. I found out toward the end of being at Duluth that those reports that I turned in were evaluated, and they were sent to Blue Book at Wright Pat and foreign intelligences, and they took them.
Foreign, like
yeah. Well, they said foreign. We were told, we were kids, we were told they were Russian military and Chinese military and that kind of stuff. That wasn't what it was, but I became very familiar with it, and it put me in a position to where I said to myself, people ask me if I believe. No, I don't believe in foreign craft.
You know.
I know.
You know.
I know. I've been there. I've seen them on the scope. I've talked to the pilots when they're chasing them or being harassed by them. I've talked to Air Defense Command pilots. I've talked to B-52 pilots who were clearing their guns over Lake Superior, getting ready to go hit their IPs up on the Arctic Circle. When they would go up and stand their position, loaded, it was all about the nukes. Anywhere that we were getting reports, and that was our whole sector, anywhere we got reports, it was because they were in the proximity of nuclear weapons, either the aircraft or the storage, or the bases that had them. And that was very interesting to me. I was learning a lot.